A warm desert wind sweeps across the Arabian Peninsula, passing over dunes that have witnessed centuries of empires, invasions, and faith. In this landscape, a child was born who would one day influence the course of global history in ways few could have imagined. Osama bin Mohammed bin Awad bin Laden entered the world in 1957 in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, into a family of wealth and privilege. His father, Mohammed bin Laden, had risen from poverty to become one of the most influential businessmen in the region. He won the trust of the Saudi royal family and built mosques, palaces, and major infrastructure across the kingdom. His children lived in a world shaped by success, comfort, and opportunity. But Osama's life would not follow a predictable path. From a young age, he was drawn to religious study and conservative teachings. He grew up during a time when Saudi Arabia was transforming rapidly under the weight of oil wealth. Western workers arrived in growing numbers. New technologies spread. Tall buildings rose from the desert. Saudis traveled abroad more frequently, bringing back ideas and cultural changes. Many welcomed these changes as signs of progress, but others feared they threatened the country's traditional values. Osama listened to voices warning against Western influence, voices that spoke of returning to strict religious principles, voices that believed moral purity was slipping away. These ideas shaped his view of the world before he ever stepped onto a battlefield. The Middle East of Osama's youth was not only changing socially, but also politically. Across the region, people debated identity, governance, and faith. Conservative religious movements gained strength. Political revolutions erupted. Nations struggled to balance tradition with modernity. Osama absorbed these tensions and saw them as signs of a world losing its way. His worldview became increasingly defined by the belief that Islam was under threat and that Muslims needed to defend their faith from outsiders. But it was not until 1979 that his convictions turned into action. That year, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. To much of the world, it was a strategic move in the Cold War. To Osama and millions of Muslims, it was an attack on a Muslim land. Religious leaders across the Middle East called for volunteers to defend Afghanistan. Young men traveled across borders to join the Mujahideen, the Afghan resistance fighters. Osama bin Laden was among them. He brought money, equipment, and the influence of his powerful family. He built networks, supplied fighters, and funded training camps. He learned about guerrilla warfare, sacrifice, and the power of ideology. Though inexperienced at first, he grew in confidence. He believed he was part of a holy struggle. As the war dragged on, something powerful happened in Osama's mind. He watched small groups of determined fighters resist one of the world's two great superpowers. He saw Soviet forces retreat in the face of Afghan resistance. This victory convinced him that faith-driven fighters could defeat even strong nations. When the Soviets withdrew in 1989, Osama believed it was more than a geopolitical decision. He believed it was divine validation. For him, the Afghan victory proved that God supported those who fought against foreign influence. This idea became the foundation of the ideology that would fuel the rest of his life. Returning home to Saudi Arabia, Osama found a world that did not match the one he envisioned. Instead of religious unity and independence, he saw governments cooperating with Western nations. He saw modern culture spreading rapidly. He saw what he believed were signs of moral decline and political weakness. But the moment that would radicalize him further came in 1990, when Iraq invaded Kuwait. The invasion created immediate panic in the Gulf. The Saudi government feared that Saddam Hussein might attack next, so it invited American troops to deploy on Saudi soil. For the ruling family, it was a matter of national survival. But for Osama bin Laden, it was a catastrophe. He believed that foreign soldiers, especially non-Muslim troops, should never be allowed on the land of Mecca and Medina. He considered it a sacred duty to protect the region. Osama offered his network of fighters from Afghanistan to defend the kingdom, claiming they could repel Saddam's forces. His offer was rejected. The government chose American protection instead. For Osama, this was betrayal. He viewed it as a humiliation and a violation of Islamic principles. He spoke out publicly, condemning the Saudi leadership and the American presence. The government responded by silencing him, restricting his movements, and eventually stripping him of his citizenship. Being cast out of his homeland deepened his resentment. The United States, which he saw as the symbol of global Western power, became the focus of his anger. He believed American military presence in Saudi Arabia was an occupation of Holy Land. That belief would become central to his ideology. Forced into exile, Osama moved to Sudan in the early 1990s. There, he built businesses that funded his operations and established training camps. He attracted followers, many of whom were veterans from the Afghan War. He strengthened connections with militant groups across the region. It was during this period that al-Qaeda, which means the base, evolved from a loose network into a structured militant organization. His speeches became more inflammatory. He accused the United States of controlling Middle Eastern governments, exploiting resources, and corrupting Muslim societies. He believed the Muslim world was in decline because of Western influence, and he saw violent struggle as the only solution. In 1996, Osama issued his first declaration of war against the United States. He argued that America had occupied the land of Mecca and Medina, harmed Muslims through sanctions and military operations, and supported authoritarian regimes. 2 years later, he released a second declaration, explicitly calling for attacks on American civilians and military personnel everywhere. These declarations were not symbolic. They were orders. Under his direction, al-Qaeda carried out increasingly violent operations. International pressure eventually pushed Sudan to expel Osama. He returned to Afghanistan, where the Taliban controlled the government. They offered him protection. In the remote mountains, far from international oversight, he rebuilt training camps. Thousands of recruits passed through these camps, learning weapons skills, explosives, and ideological indoctrination. Al-Qaeda operated with a clear structure, financial network, and strategic goals. Osama became the face of a global movement that believed violence could reshape the world. From Afghanistan, he directed major attacks. In 1998, coordinated bombings at U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania killed hundreds of people. The attacks shocked the world and marked al-Qaeda as a major international threat. In 2000, the USS Cole, a U.S. Navy destroyer, was struck by a suicide attack in Yemen, killing 17 American sailors. The United States launched missile strikes against suspected training camps, but Osama evaded every attempt to capture or kill him. Each escape reinforced his belief that he was protected by fate or divine intervention. As the new millennium approached, Osama planned something far more devastating. He believed America was the central force preventing the Muslim world from becoming what he envisioned. He believed that only a dramatic, high-impact attack could weaken American influence and inspire Muslims globally. His organization prepared throughout the late 1990s, gathering recruits, training operatives, and studying potential targets. On September 11, 2001, 19 al-Qaeda operatives hijacked 4 commercial airliners and launched coordinated attacks on American soil. Nearly 3,000 people were killed in a single morning. For Osama, this was meant to be the defining strike against the United States, an action that would reveal America's vulnerability and lead to a broader awakening in the Muslim world. But the result was the opposite. Instead of weakening America, the attacks united the nation and triggered the war on terror. The United States demanded that the Taliban hand over Osama bin Laden. When they refused, American and allied forces invaded Afghanistan. The Taliban regime collapsed quickly. Al-Qaeda's camps were destroyed. Many of its members were captured or killed. Osama escaped into the mountains, moving between cave networks and remote settlements to avoid detection. From hiding, he released video statements, attempting to justify the attacks and rally followers, but his ability to direct operations diminished. For nearly 10 years, he remained one of the most hunted individuals on the planet. Intelligence agencies from multiple countries tracked every possible lead. Al-Qaeda splintered into regional groups. Global security measures changed dramatically. Osama watched as the world transformed in response to the ideology he had helped shape. In 2011, after years of investigation, U.S. forces located him in a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. In a nighttime raid, Navy SEALs entered the compound and killed him. His death marked the end of a decade-long pursuit. But the extremist ideology he spread continued through various groups around the world. Osama bin Laden became an enemy of the United States through a combination of ideology, geopolitical events, personal beliefs, humiliation, and conflict. His early convictions, his experiences in Afghanistan, his anger over American troops in Saudi Arabia, and his desire to lead a global movement all contributed to the path he chose. His story is one of a man shaped by history, and a man who, in turn, reshaped history through choices that affected millions of lives.